Hello, is this thing on?
Do you think they can hear us?
Nah. Let's say it again. Hi, and welcome to the Gritty Nurse Podcast, an unfiltered discussion related to health and healthcare. My name is Amie,
And my name is Sara.
and we are your podcast hosts.
If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon, or any other podcast listening platform, don't forget to subscribe so you can get updates to when we have our latest episodes. Also, don't forget to rate and review us.
And if you like what you're hearing and you love our advocacy work, don't forget to go to www.grittynurse.com and click on the donate button.
As little as $1 or $2 a month for a total of $12 a year will help us with our monthly podcast costs, such as website hosting, our hosting platform,
audio equipment, and the time and energy it takes us to put out good quality episodes. We thank you and we appreciate you. So today we have a very interesting episode. I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah, actually, it was interesting because a nurse reached out to us and she shared us a story that I think was quite shocking and quite surprising given the current climate we're in right now with the pandemic. So, essentially, what happened was this is a new nurse, she's a new grad, and she had been applying to jobs, as many new grads do. And she actually was able to secure two interviews at the same hospital. While she had completed her first interview, she was sitting in a common area of the hospital. The first interview went well from her perspective, and she was just passing the time waiting for her second interview. And what happened was the manager for the first interview happened to pass her and said, "Oh, you're still here. What are you doing here?" And she replied that she was actually waiting for her second interview of the day at the same hospital with a different unit. And so, she just said, okay, and she kept walking. The nurse attended her second interview and finished that and went home. And then what happened a couple days later was she actually got a call with the managers from both units on the same phone line, and they really berated her and said, you shouldn't have been applying to two jobs. What were you thinking? We're going to blacklist you from the hospital. And I was really shocked when I heard that because I can't believe that in this day and age, given the fact that the pandemic is going on and we're desperate for nurses, that this is how a nurse would be treated. What are your thoughts about this, Amie?
Yeah, I mean, when I first heard the story and it first was broke to me, I was really surprised to hear one that they'd be turning a nurse away during a pandemic, and two, the way that she was treated. Like the other piece that she brought into was the fact that now mentally she doesn't actually want to be a nurse anymore, and then how much it has actually affected her mental health. But let's kind of break it down in terms of like what actually happened there. I think the first thing that I found shocking was the manager's behavior. Like where did they think it would have been a good idea to actually call her, double team her, essentially bully her, and tell her that she can't apply to two jobs? Does that even make sense? It didn't make any sense to me.
No, it doesn't make sense. And let's be honest, anybody who's ever been on the hunt is going to apply for as many jobs as they can in order to secure a job. And just because you have an interview, it's not a guarantee of getting the position. So why wouldn't you go on as many interviews as you could? And I actually think it was pretty honest of her to disclose to that first manager that she was waiting for a second interview because she could have easily made up a lie or just said something really vague. Like she didn't have to disclose that. But the thing is, she did. And the effect of that was that she was really negatively, poorly treated by this organization. And I'm even trying to think from the perspective of the managers, like what good would really come of this? If this was any other industry, I feel like the two managers would have been fighting over who got to hire her. Someone that is so qualified in a time when we're at such a shortage, it really doesn't make any sense at all. Like, yes, she was looking for more than one job. That's not illegal. That is actually what everybody's doing right now. And I don't know if this job was full or part time, but it's really hard these days to secure a full time job with benefits. And really, that's what everyone's looking for.
Absolutely. And I think like just going back to, the accountability on the manager's part, one of the things that I always think, and like you said, right? It's fair competition. She applied to two jobs. She got two interviews. She was doing a great job. So that's exactly what's supposed to happen. And the fact that the managers found it okay to then call her, double team her, and tell her that she was not doing the right thing, I think is absurd. Again, it speaks to this whole culture that we talk about bullying. And the thing is, I don't think she would have said anything if she didn't actually reach out to us. Like, I think that she felt she had a platform to say, "Hey, I was bullied, I was silenced," or whatever the case may be, and this was my experience, and maybe otherwise she wouldn't have actually spoken up, and it took her 3 months for her to say, "Hey, I had this really negative experience, and this is what happened to me." But I again, like, why does this keep happening in nursing? Why is it that we have this culture where, people find it okay to have this type of behavior? It's not even incivility. It is at this point, it's bullying. They should have never done what they did to her.
Right. And I think this nurse's reaction was very common. She probably blamed herself that she shouldn't have done that. She did the wrong thing. I should only apply to one job, put all my eggs into one basket. And then, of course, being silent. Like, of course, this is something that she's going to, not want to talk about because of the issues that come with speaking up. And, I want to thank this nurse for coming forward and sharing this story with myself and Amie, because it probably does happen more often than we realize, and it shouldn't. I'm even really confused as to the whole process, because usually when you are invited to the interview, human resources will reach out to you.
Right.
So if this was the case, why would human resources have arranged 2 interviews if this was going to be such a big problem? I mean, I don't really understand the whole process, but really, unless there was a scheduling conflict between the interviews, it really was none of anybody's business whether or not she was, going for more than one job at a time. And I also think this kind of shows the manager's own insecurities, because maybe they really did want her, but instead of verbalizing it, instead of saying, like, hey, we really want you to come work for this unit rather than the other unit, they decided to bully and blacklist her. And I'm sure this nurse is not going to want to work for any unit in their hospital
Yeah,
after
I mean,
this.
the whole blacklisting part, like, who are they to even decide whether they can blacklist this nurse or not, right? Let's do this first. Let's speak to the nurse. So first and foremost, you did absolutely nothing wrong. You are actually able to apply to as many jobs as you want to. It's fair competition, and it was on the onus of the employer that they actually like wanted to interview you on two different or on the same day. And really, you did nothing wrong. Now let's speak to the manager's behavior. The fact that they decided, because they had to take the time to sit down and discuss this nurse, right? And this is where we talk about again that bullying. We see it also when we were in our own careers when let's say we were at a table where we had the opportunity to hire someone where you know how the process works. We do the interview, the person leaves, and then it's like myself, you, and whoever else was on the hiring team all going, "Oh, how many points does this person get? How many points does this person get? Will they get the job or will they not?" But in this case, those 2 nurses, those 2 nurse managers must have taken it upon themselves to sit and discuss her and then say, "What plan are we to come up with talking to this person?" Well, the plan that they had was a horrible one. The fact that they decided to do this was crazy. Why didn't they even think about, "Hey, maybe we should reach out to HR and find out what the right way or the right approach was?" And they didn't do that. They decided to take it upon their own hands, and even with the whole saying that they can blacklist her, they have actually no right. No nurse manager can just say they can blacklist you from an organization. Plus, she wasn't hired, so what are they blacklisting her from?
Yeah, I have never actually heard that term before. Like, you can't actually blacklist someone. Like, okay, let's say someone got fired from a particular unit, then I think that might be grounds for quote unquote blacklisting, but that's not even a real term. Like, you could say, I'm not going to hire this person back, but it's not like there's a laminated list somewhere where it's like, do not hire this person. That doesn't exist. And I actually feel like that's discrimination. So, I mean, like I said, the nurse did nothing wrong. I feel like this is a really big gaping problem in the system where we're not supporting nurses, and we say this a lot, but really, I think in this situation, there couldn't have been a worse response to this nurse applying to 2 different jobs. Like, I think in any other industry, it might have been like, hey, we're both going to call you and see when you can start sooner so we can snatch you up. Or, like, I mean, in nursing, we can't really negotiate our salary because it's sort of based on years of experience. But other industries might be like, hey, we're going to get you to come, we're going to pay you more, we're going to give you more vacation and benefits. But in this case, it's like, nope, we don't even want you, don't even bother. And I mean, like, this nurse felt like both her interviews went well. So I mean, we're not even giving her a fair chance based on her merit. We're talking about a circumstantial situation which really has no, it has no effect on her ability to perform the job. And I actually think that this is something that people need to hear about, because in, I mean, like, I think this should have been reported to HR. I know this nurse feels uncomfortable with it, but even anonymously, I think this is something that the higher ups need to know about that's
Well,
occurring.
absolutely. We keep talking about it. We have a nursing shortage, right? Look at they actually did a report saying, look at how many jobs there are out there where they don't have nurses filling them. They're just like, "Oh, there are hundreds of thousands of," sorry, I think it was like tens of thousands of jobs that were put out in all of Canada saying, "Oh, we don't have nurses to fill them, but we have the time to, like, turn nurses away and say, 'We don't like your hiring your job application, practices, so we're going to not give you a fair chance.'" Like, I think that's crazy.
And I think it's just like the intent behind this was totally vindictive. If you really didn't want her, you could have just not called her back. Like, why take the extra time and energy to actually bring this nurse down to the point where she questioned her choice to be a nurse? Like, think about how much time and energy it takes to go through nursing school, and to have a situation like this happen so early in your career to make you question your career when you haven't even started yet.
Yeah, I mean, bringing it back to the fact that she was a new grad, right? And I mean, so it's a global pandemic. She's a new grad, so we know how stressful that already is. Applying for her first job, and then it wasn't even like it was a no, it was like a not a chance. And I can only think about how that would have made the nurse feel. And I'm trying to kind of put myself in her position where, if this was me, what would I have done? And I think this is where we can kind of talk about maybe some of the things that we might have done differently or what we would have done in that situation. And I think that if it was me, the first thing I would have done was I would have been like, "Okay, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you." And I probably would have reached out to HR, but we always say that HR is not your friend, right? I probably would have reached out to I would have reached out to the HR department anyways and said, "Hey, this is actually what happened." And then again, I think the other thing, this is where we talk about nursing silencing and nursing voice. I think it would have been okay to actually write about her experience to say, "Hey, this is what happened to me." When you're actually interviewing, you're also interviewing the place that you're working for, right? So just the same way that you actually be they're asking questions of you, you're actually taking that feedback and saying, "Hey, is this a place that I actually want to work as well?" And I think, off the hop, she probably thought, this is a great place. This is a great employer. But then after that experience, that right there would say, this is probably not the best place for you to work. And if they're showing you right off the hop that they're not going to be supportive of you, then this is definitely not an organization that you'd want to work for.
Yeah, I agree. I think this should be reported to HR. I think actually it should be reported in writing. So I think it's more important than just a phone call. I think it requires in writing, like, I mean, it's up to that nurse, but as many details as possible to hold these people accountable. And it could even be sent anonymously. However, I do think there's more weight in attaching your name so that people know who you are. I would even suggest reporting to higher management. So maybe the director of the program that she interviewed for, or even the chief nursing officer, because often these are things that they're not aware of. And if they get this, really in time feedback, there is an opportunity for them to change their practices or, discipline the person that was responsible. I also wanted to say to this nurse to keep applying. You have a lot to offer. Employers should be lucky to have you. Please don't take this one negative experience as something that happens everywhere, because I can honestly say that in my almost 14 years as a nurse, I have not heard of this, and I don't want you to be discouraged. So please don't think of this one thing as something that is going to happen again. And if it does happen again, you know what you need to do now. And like like you said, Amie, I think this is also a red flag, because when I would go to interviews myself, I would think about like um, how I was treated. Did they start on time? Did they seem prepared? Were they trying to make me feel welcome on the unit? Did they give me a tour of the unit? Maybe that doesn't happen now with the pandemic, but giving a tour of the unit is a really nice way to sort of orient the person to the place they might be working. So I think every little interaction you have with an organization prior to your starting of a job, it really gives you a sense of the workplace culture and is this somewhere that you want to be. So that's what I would say to this nurse. And like, don't blame yourself. You can't just only apply to one job, because let's face it, like a lot of nurses are applying to 10, 20 jobs before they even get an interview. And if you haven't had to do that, then count your blessings, because it is
It
tough out
is.
there right now these days.
Yeah, and I mean, just kind of going off of some of the things that you said too, right? I think that, like, you can escalate up the chain of command. So let's say you've reached out to their direct managers and you're not getting the feedback that you want. Write a letter right to the CEO of the hospital. You have those opportunities, and you know what? Maybe you can, if you're not getting the answer that you want from them, you can continue to take it further. And I'm sure there are other sorry, not organizations, but there are employee work boards that you can actually speak to about the type of experience that you had, because it's not even just that it was a negative one, it was one that shouldn't actually have occurred. There's no reason that you can't have competition and apply to more than one position. And really, let's talk about the accountability too. So what does the organization have in terms of holding these managers accountable? What do you think would be the best approach forward? Do you think that these two nurse managers should be fired?
That's a good question. I mean, I think we need to talk about it. We need to be transparent about what's happening behind closed doors. I mean, it wouldn't be a bad idea to have a policy around this, that it is acceptable and it's encouraged for nurses to attend more than one interview, that you can't actually be blacklisted for applying to more than one job, and that, say you are already an employee of the hospital, there is no harm in applying for another job at the same hospital. I've been part of a hospital where I worked two different jobs, two different units. It was never an issue, but I feel like this was an organization that had a healthy work culture. They encouraged nurses to take opportunities to grow in their career. So again, it just speaks to the work culture and what you are getting yourself into. In terms of being fired, I mean, maybe depending on what else they've done, like maybe this is an ongoing thing, and many nurses have experienced it, but without a further investigation we wouldn't really know.
And I think that I'm going to kind of capture what you were saying there. Like, I think this is probably a pattern of behavior. It's not just one time that you're a bully to somebody. If you're a bully, you're probably a bully many more times. So maybe it is about performance appraisal, right? I think that at the very least, these nurse managers owe her an apology. At the very least, whether it's in writing or whatever, they need to apologize for what they have done, because what they did was not right. There's no other ways around it. But in terms of, again, looking at what should happen with them, maybe, like you said, maybe they should be. I think we need to investigate it, because it can't be an isolated incident. Could you imagine, these people are managing a large number of nurses, so could you imagine how the nurses feel working under that particular manager? They're probably just as scared of her or him as this particular nurse was. So again, I think this is where you might need to look into what performance management and say, hey, maybe there are other issues, and this was kind of the one that we've actually were able to catch, rather than all of the other shady complaints or other types of complaints that may have come through.
Yeah, and I'd be interested to know with these particular units what the turnover rate is, because
They were
if
COVID
the
units, by the way.
they were COVID
Yeah.
units. So I'd be interested to know what the turnover rate is, because that is often really telling as to how employees feel working in a particular unit. And actually, with COVID units, I am very surprised, because other COVID units I've heard of are only taking new grads, because they're the only people that want to work on the COVID units, because they're looking for that experience. And so, like, that's what makes this whole story all the more confusing to me. Like, I really don't understand. And I'd just be interested to know what the turnover rate is, or, ask them, like, please explain to me what you were thinking. I really want to know, because is it because this is how you were treated in the past and you're perpetuating the cycle? Is there some sort of strategy that you're working on? Like, I just really want to know.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? Like, what are our next steps? What are some things that we can really say, like, other than we've said to the nurse, hey, thank you for reporting it. I guess maybe that would be your first thing. So, like, if it is you that is having the situation, or this has occurred to you, I think the first thing is to actually speak out, right? Tell your truth, tell your story. There's no harm in saying that this is my experience and this is what happened to me. Again, I continue to encourage nurses to speak up and speak out on these things, because again, nothing will change if we don't talk about the issues.
And my advice to that nurse is, what do you have to lose? You didn't
Right.
get the job.
Exactly.
You're
She
all,
had
like,
nothing to lose
honestly,
now.
like, all nurses, their worst fear of everything is, like, I'm going to get fired. Well, guess what? I'm not going to rub it in, but you didn't get the job anyway. You didn't get either job. So what is the harm? I think if I were that nurse, I would use social media to
Blow it up.
speak up. I'm glad she told us. Because like what do you have to lose? Like maybe a potential employer would see your story and be like, "Hey, there's a nurse that's advocating for herself and her colleagues. I want to hire her. I think she's going to do a great job because she is able to talk about what's right and I if she can do this for herself, then maybe this is how she's going to advocate for a patient that deserves better treatment." So I really think in this case, at least in this early stage of your career, there is nothing to lose. There's only a lot to gain.
Absolutely. No, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think one of the things that she did mention to us was, yeah, like the reason she didn't speak it was she was fearful that she might not get hired, she might not get another job. But I think she needs to move beyond that. And it's so hugely important now to say, you know what, this is my experience. Because I'm sure that as much as we haven't heard about these other stories, that I'm sure it's happened to other people. And again, this is why we talk about storytelling and making sure that you can share your experiences, because there probably is someone else out there that has experienced the same thing as her.
And
So
like in just my experience, and I think you experienced this as well, like some people that are bullies, they respect you when you stand up to them. So they think that you're a pushover, you new grad. The minute you stand up to them, they back off and they start respecting you for some really messed up reason. And then they might even be like, "Hey, do you want to come for work for you or work for us?" And she'd be like, "See ya, I got another job."
well, this is where we say, like, okay, in the moment, these things are really hard. We talk about like practicing your these types of conversations, right? And I think that when that was happening to her, of course, she probably there was no way that she would have felt comfortable to say something. But I think this is where I would encourage her to actually call to say, hey, here's my experience. Maybe I have the opportunity now to actually talk to the managers and tell them exactly how they made me feel. Because I think that's actually another important piece. She needs to let them know what they did to her and how this actually made her feel. And I think it would be hugely important to have that opportunity. And if she's courageous, I don't want to even say courageous enough. If she feels that the time is right, that she should be able to say, hey, this was my experience. I actually want to speak to these two managers who did this to me and actually tell them her story.
Hmm. So, to our listeners, I think that if this is something you've experienced, please listen to our episode and take down some of this advice. We really want to help nurses. So, if this has happened to you, please feel free to reach out. And we don't want you to feel like you're alone.
Absolutely. You're never alone. We're always here to raise your voices, to continue to listen to your stories, and encourage you to be your true self. And again, like to speak your truth. We always say that, speak your truth.
Speak your truth.